Welcome back. We've been evaluating the first few months of the Obama presidency with Flint Everett, a former top Middle East analyst in the White House, State Department and CIA, who left the Bush administration in 2003 over disagreements on Middle East policy. Now, before we resume our discussion, let's take a look at the result of that poll we conducted over the break. We asked you to rate President Obama's job performance during his first 100 days, and here are the results. 24% said he's doing an excellent job. 24% said good. 24% said satisfactory, and 28% said he's doing a poor job. Interesting division there. What do you make of that, Lynn?
I think what it reflects is a mix of reactions. And on the one hand, as I said earlier, people around the world are very drawn to this figure. I think he has a genuine degree of charisma. His rhetoric appeals to them. The kinds of aspirations he voices appeals to them. And they want him to succeed. But they're not really clear at this point whether he really is succeeding. And I think he still has an enormous reservoir of goodwill that if he does succeed, people will say, that's great, that's fine, more power to you. But over time, the expectations are going to shift more from, boy, he really says good things, to, okay, what's actually happening on the ground.
Now, of course, one argument the former administration, the Bush administration, put forward regularly for its decision-making was that it was making America a safer place. And the former Vice President, Dick Cheney, lashed out at Barack Obama, saying that that he was basically making America less safe through his reversal of those key anti-terrorism policies and, quote, raised the risk to the American people of another attack. Do you agree?
No, I don't. This is one of the reasons that I think it's regrettable we're not having a more systematic review of what was actually done during the Bush years, because as part of that, we could actually begin to unpack this argument about whether this actually did produce results that mattered. There are people like me who would basically like to take a position that the United States is never going to do certain things. But in the political reality of American society, I think really a lot of this, how people feel about it, does hinge on whether people think, well, this actually does produce some good stuff, or, you know, this is bad and it doesn't even work. I think if you really looked at the record deeply, you would come out with an evaluation that this really didn't help us in the war on terror. The FBI, as an organization, basically refused to use these techniques because their experience suggested that it would just get them bad information.
Well, let's get a call on the line from Saudi Arabia. Zasir, good to have you with us. What would you like to ask?
Yes, the gentleman host, he was saying that there are terrorist activities in Kashmir, whereas if you go in 1949, there was a resolution unanimously passed by the United.
Go on, keep going, Zahir. I guess maybe we lost Zahir. Yeah, he was basically talking about Kashmir and the issue of. But I guess he's disagreeing with what you were saying, basically about the situation there.
About Kashmir. You know, I don't think I said anything about it.
Actually, I think we were talking about Afghanistan, Pakistan.
That's right. I mean, I think there is a link to Kashmir in that you could certainly make an argument that it would be easier for Pakistan to take some of the steps the United States would like them to take in terms of dealing with the Northwest Territories if the Kashmir issue was in a more basically resolved, and if India wasn't perceived as such a security threat to Pakistan. It seems as if the Obama administration, in its approach to Afghanistan and Pakistan, is largely punting on the question of Indo-Pakistani relations, in particular Kashmir. And
of course, the president has another a big factor on his plate, the one of Iran, which under the Bush administration was very much considered a threat. Do you feel like threat's been reduced somewhat with the engagement that the current president's undertaking?
I think, again, this is a very good example of where he really has started off very well at the rhetorical level, saying he wants to deal with Iran on the basis of mutual respect, referring in public to the leaders and people of the Islamic Republic, saying he wants to deal with all of the issues that divide the United States and Iran. All of that is exactly the right rhetorical frame. But now the Iranians, among others, are saying, okay, now what's the policy? what do you actually want to do about the nuclear issue? What do you actually want to do about various regional security problems? And I think he has a real opportunity to put U.S.-Iranian relations on a much better trajectory than they've been for almost 30 years. But to do so, he's really going to have to come up with clear and coherent policies and pursue really strategically grounded diplomacy. And that's where we have to watch and see if the implementation will match the good rhetorical start.
Now, of course, in 100 days, there's not much you can do apart from rhetorical stuff. But I wonder, with the issue of a place like Iran, perhaps North Korea too, where there's a lot of push and shove when it comes to face and face value, whether the fact that President Obama is able to get around this issue of face and the loss of face that George Bush and his government seem to ignore on the international front, that might actually make a big difference.
It's certainly a very necessary and essential part of putting diplomatic possibilities on the table. If you don't have that, you're not really going to get to the table or be able to accomplish anything if you do get there. And I certainly give him high marks for taking those initial rhetorical steps.
One of the biggest factors, of course, he's going to have to handle is the Israeli-Palestinian situation. We had an email on that from Jay Morris in the United States here, who wrote in saying, I think his plans for Afghanistan will succeed, but the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only be achieved by these two countries if Gaza will accept the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas as its leader. He's getting into quite a tricky situation, President Obama here.
He is. I actually would take a different perspective on the Palestinian issue right now than the lady who wrote in with the email. I tend to think this is an issue where the parties basically can't do this on their own. We like to say in the United States we can't want peace more than the parties, but in reality we can want it more than they do, and I think we almost certainly do want it more than they do. It involves real sacrifice in a political sense for various constituencies on both sides. And I think if he's really going to salvage any prospect for a two-state solution, President Obama is really going to have to get out in front and say some things about the parameters for resolving final status issues in a way that really, puts this on the table for Israelis and Palestinians to do this. If he simply acts as a kind of reactive mediator, it's not going to work.
Do you get, we've discussed so many international issues over this show. Do you get the feeling at all in America that there are people here who are very worried that his eyes are overseas and that he hasn't given enough attention to the domestic front?
I don't pick that up here. I don't sort of pick it up in the air. I don't pick it up when I look at polls. I think he's done a very good job so far of giving the American people a sense of confidence that he is at least seriously engaged with the economic problems we're facing. He may not have solved them all, but he is at least engaged, trying hard. People give him very high marks in polls for that. And he's been able to balance that. It's freed him up to do a significant amount of initial engagement with international issues. So I think he's performed that balancing act pretty well so far.
Well, let's get an email in here which came in from Michael Langley in California in the US. Michael Langley wrote in saying, failures may be more common than mistakes. He did actually say before in the email that he supports him very much, but he says failures may be more common than mistakes. Failure is an attempt without success. Since President Obama cannot control all variables, I expect him to fail occasionally. I will be content if he has a part in making this a more equitable and therefore peaceful and prosperous world. Michael Langley sounds very patient with President Obama, of course, supporting it. How long do you think the American people will give him now? 100 days is not a natural marker for a lot of people, but how long before people get really keen to see the rhetoric come into reality?
Well, I think that's probably going to vary from issue to issue. The economy is going to be first and foremost in people's minds. They're really going to want to see some signs that things are turning around or at least bottoming out, and feel that the policies are having some positive effect. In the international sphere, I think it's going to, it's going to vary from issue to issue. Arab-Israeli issues always have a certain political salience in the United States. So what he does there is going to get a fair amount of attention. On Iran, it will depend on the situation. Is Iran, putting more and more centrifuges into Natanz over the next few months, or is Iran basically trying to find a way into a negotiation. That will affect people's reactions.
Well, Flint Everett, it was great to have a chance to chat with us. Thank you for covering so much ground with us in this show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for being with us. On the next show, we look at the situation behind the closed doors of North Korea and look at the human rights conditions there, which seem to be getting from bad to worse. Hope you'll join us with your questions for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.